Thank you very much for watching The Spirit's Voice. Let me move this couple things out of the way here. I'm just out here in the shop working on some reloading stuff because I love to go shooting. And if I have primers and like that, which I have some of, and I can get some reloading done, I can actually afford to do it. Otherwise, I don't know. And that's probably part of the subject matter of this little vlog, I guess you would call it. And let me get a Bible so it's kind of a vlog and a little bit of a lesson. In fact, what I want to look at here is in Ecclesiastes chapter 11, starting in verse 1. So if you want to go there, you can. It's a tough time right now, and I've spoken about that on this channel a couple of times. And when times are tough is when people start drawing to the Lord more. I know that I do that. When everything's bopping along, and I'm doing really well, I can get busy and kind of forget about God. And I really try not to do that. But the truth is, I think that's human nature. If we don't need Him, we forget that we need Him. Well, the truth is we need Him all the time. And so when things bad happen, well, now we really need Him. There used to be an old saying, I think it came out of World War I, that there's no atheists in foxholes, and that's probably true. I really don't know. But with what's going on right now in Ukraine and all that, and then, of course, the economy and the gas prices, and, of course, the price of everything. Naturally, gas really stings everybody because it's not just driving around, it's also heating fuel for your house, depending on the part of the country you're in, and the fact that everything, planes, trains, boats, automobiles, semi-tractor trailers, they all run on fossil fuels, and so if those are expensive, everything else is expensive too. So it gets tough for people. I know my son and his wife are really feeling it right about now. Well, my point is a little story, I guess. My Grandpa Charlie and my Grandma Rose, they were born right around the turn of the century, around 1900. And in fact, I think my Grandma Rose was born in 1900. And so when they were young, they lived through some tough times, World War I and World War II and the Depression and all those things. They also lived through the Roaring 20s, which is kind of cool when you think about it. But in any case, they had a tough time. Back then there was no such thing as Social Security or disability or any of that. You had to figure it out. And I remember them telling me stories about when they were young, trying to set aside something for themselves and actually be able to buy a house and maybe having some investments and maybe be able to retire at some point. And so he got a job. They moved to California because he hurt his back in the automobile factory where he was working back east. And he just couldn't live in the cold anymore. It was miserable in the wintertime. So they moved out here when California was not nearly as populous a state as it is now. And they lived in Long Beach, California in the 30s. And during that time, he got a job as a welder, and then he ended up at the shipyards welding. And he bought a little house with his money, kind of a dumpster fire. And then on the weekends, he would fix it up and sell it and then make a little money, and then he'd try to do it over and over again. And that was his kind of side gig, I guess, in addition to welding. And then my grandmother, who obviously women back then didn't work that much if they were married, she was raising my son, or raising her son, my dad. And but she wanted to contribute, and so she was doing what a lot of women did back then. She did odd things, that make a little money. She raised chickens, and from there she had the eggs and she sold them. And once in a while she sold a chicken because her, fryers are different than layers, just in case you don't know anything about chickens. And so she raised some fryers to sell for food, and she had some laying hens to lay eggs, and she'd sell lay eggs. And then she brought in what they called hand washing. It was laundry, basically. And she'd do the laundry for people who had the money to pay her on the washboard in the tub, and then she'd use the wringer to hand wring it and hang it up on the line, fold them up, and then they could come get them and they'd pay her. And that's how she made money to contribute. Well, if you get a chance to look up Proverbs 31 and read that, starting in verse 10, I think, is where it begins by saying, "A wife of noble character who can find? She is worth more than rubies." I quote that to my wife a lot because my wife reminds me in this way of my Grandma Rose. My Grandma Rose was a wife of noble character. And that scriptural passage really describes my grandmother. And frankly, it describes my wife. But the passage I'm going to show you now tells us, don't depend on your own way of thinking so much, but just do your part. And here's how to do your part. And if you do your part, you know what? It's going to work out. So let's look at Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verse 1. My understanding is, I could be wrong, so if I am, you tell me. I'm not a theologian, but this was written by King Solomon, everybody thinks. So here you go. In verse 1, cast your bread upon the waters, for after many days you will find it again. And I've got very little light and super small print, so forgive me if I mess it up. Give portions to 7, yes, to 8, for you do not know what disaster may come upon the land. Now, there's another translation I was reading the other day when I was looking at the scripture more, and it talked about sending your grain out on merchant ships, and after many days you would get a return. And send it not just on 1, but send it out on 7, yes, 8, because you don't know what disaster may strike. Some of them may sink, some of them may not get there, some of them may be destroyed in war or from pirates or whatever. So don't put all your eggs in one basket is the basic message there. And then it goes on to say, if clouds are full of water, they pour rain upon the earth. Whether a tree falls to the north or to the south or to the north, in the place where it falls, there it will lie. Sort of a fancy way of saying it is what it is. You can't do anything about that. You can't determine where the wind comes from or where it goes. You can't determine where a tree is going to fall one way or the other unless you're the one chopping it down. If it just falls, it falls, and it lands where it lands. And so there are things that are going on in life that you and I do not get to determine. These are things that God determines, or if, whatever, it just happens. It is what it is. And I actually hate that statement, to be honest with you, because it means I can't control it. If it is what it is, I cannot control it. Well, there's a lot in life that we can't control. And then he goes on to say, whoever watches the wind will not plant, and whoever looks at the clouds will not reap. For years, I have been teaching my kids, and my wife has heard me say it for decades now, that perfect is never done. We want to do things, and we want to do them at the right time, the perfect time. We want to wait for the great timing. We want to watch the signs around us, and we'll do it if it's the great timing, and if it's not, we won't. I've probably mentioned this scripture before on this channel, and it's because I live it a lot. I spend a lot of time in it, and if I have, forgive me, but I think it's worth talking about again. At some point, we have to look at things and go, okay, I don't get to determine the timing of this. I have to trust in God's timing. And sometimes we want to do something, but we want the something that we're doing to be perfect before we finish it. And I can tell you, having lived quite a while and owned several businesses and done a lot of projects, and that perfect is never done. If you want it to be perfect, you're never going to get it done because it's never going to be perfect. So just get it done. Get it done. Do the best you can and get it done. And I think that's a lot of Solomon's lesson here. There may be other things that I don't see, and if you do, please share them, because we all, the Spirit teaches us differently, each one of us, out of these things, because we all need different things. As you do not know, he goes on to say in verse 9, I think, or maybe it's 5. I don't know. I can't see it without my glasses. As you do not know the path of the wind or how the body is formed in the mother's womb, so you cannot understand the work of God, the maker of all things. And then he goes on to tell us what to do. We've just been told it is what it is, get over it. You don't control that, God does. Stop trying to do it the perfect way, just do the best you can. And stop trying to do it at the perfect time, because you're never going to figure out when that is. It's like people who are stock traders. I'm going to buy at the bottom and sell at the top. No, you're not, because nobody knows when it's going to be at the bottom and when it's going to be at the top. You buy low and sell high, perhaps, unless you're shorting things, but that's a whole different conversation. But you're never going to be at the absolute top, and you're never going to be at the absolute bottom because you're waiting for the perfect time. Well, that's going to hurt you. So perfect is never done. Then he goes on to say, sow your seed in the morning, and at the evening let not your hands be idle, for you do not know which will succeed, whether this or that, or whether both will do equally as well. Sow your seed in the morning, and then in the evening let not your hands be idle. Well, that's, I'm not trying to tell you that you should be a workaholic. I mean, that's not good either. I mean, there's extremes to everything, and sometimes in moderation is the best way to look at things. When you get on the real ragged extremes of things, sometimes they can cause you harm. So I'm not telling you should be a workaholic, but don't be idle either. And I would say that it's good for us to look at hard times and see those as an opportunity to put these scriptures into practice. One of the things about challenging times is we tend to run to God more during them And if that's the case, then let's see them as an opportunity to run to God and see him work. We get to run to God, and then we get to sit back as we're doing our little part and see how he's going to do what he's going to do. We don't even know what he's going to do, but we know he's going to do something. And we know because he loves us, he's going to let us see part of it. We may not see all of it, but we're going to be able to see part of it. And I think that's where we need to get as followers of Christ. We got to get to the point where we can go, yep, that was God right there. But that's only one part of it. We also have to get to the point where we go, ooh, that's the devil right there, so that we aren't drawn in where the devil wants to deceive us. We've got to be able to pick out the Lord and his work from the devil and his. And if we can get to the point where we're listening to the Spirit, what he's saying in our head, what he's, what we're feeling in our heart based upon the way the Spirit feels about this or that, we can somehow determine, because he's showing us, that no, that's the devil, that's God over there, go that way. And then just do our little part. Sow your seed in the morning and do your job during the day. Do whatever your job is, or whether that's working for yourself or whether you're retired and you've got a little side gig going on or whatever it is. And then in the evening, don't let yourself be idle. Don't sit around doing nothing. At least do something while you're doing something else. For example, sometimes my wife will put together the stuff for the accountant and the receipts and like that while she's watching a murder mystery or whatever. It doesn't mean that you can't do fun things, but try each day to move the ball forward a little bit so that when you go to bed at night, you can know, yeah, you know what? I did something productive today for my family and for myself. And if you just do that, then you've done your little part, and God is going to do miracles with that. He will do miraculous things with that, because what we have to admit at some point is, even when we do a lot, compared to the part that he does, we've only done a very, very little. We are very, very small, and he is really, really big. So just do your little part. Sow your seeds in the morning, and in the evening, do not let your hands be idle. And that's why I'm out here tonight. I did work a lot today. I produced a video for GunGuyTV, did an interview with Alan Rice from Gun Owners of America. It'll be posted in the next few days. And I did some other work around the house that needed to be done. And then I'm out here, I'm thinking, well, it's not that late. It's only about 8:30. I'll come out here and I'll work on some brass for a little bit. And then when I got here, I thought I'd chat with you. And that keeps me from being idle. And in chatting with you, not only am I not being idle where my family's concerned, I'm moving the ball forward a little bit this evening. And then I can go and sit down and read or have a glass of wine with my wife or whatever we wish to do. We can just chat, or I can watch if I want to watch a TV show, which I hardly ever do, I can do that. Or I can read my book or whatever I want to do. And I can relax, because it's good to do that. But at the same time, I know that I've been productive for my family, and in sharing what I'm doing, I've been productive in the Lord, because I shared it with you. And that's kind of what we want to do. Otherwise, if we sulk and worry and all that kind of stuff, and then we're unproductive, we're just wasting the life that God has given us. So I urge you to be productive for the Lord in whatever way the Spirit leads you to do that. We're all different, right? No, the foot cannot say to the eye, I don't need you, or the eye cannot say to the hand, I don't need you. We know about that scripture, right? We're all different, and we all do different things for the Lord, and we do them differently. And you know what? Whatever way God made you, that's the way to do it. I love Rick Warren's book on the perfect purpose-driven life, because he talks about we each have a shape. Okay, so whatever your shape is, use that. Sow your seed in the morning. Don't let your hands be idle in the evening, and be productive every day. And if you're doing that and you're focused on the Lord, then all this stuff going on with Ukraine, all this stuff going on with the economy is going to fade to the background, and your stress level will go down, and you won't be worried about it, because you'll be trusted in God. And if you're going to put your trust anywhere, don't put it in men and stuff and economies, for crying out loud. Put it in the Lord, because he's eternal, and he never does anything wrong, and he always does everything right. So there you go. Who better to trust in? Thank you very much for watching The Spirit's Voice. I really do appreciate it. If you think these videos will help someone else, please feel free to share them.